Chapter 51. Hidden Rooms. Bree closed her eyes. Only the last jewel remained to be activated, and that would come by defeating Zirum. She sighed, put the pendant back, and turned back to the throne. "We need to go after Zirum," she said, looking over at the other two. "Are you ready?" They nodded as they came closer. She grabbed the mystic sword off the ground as she approached the throne. Once they came around behind the throne, they found themselves in a small alcove with 4 curtains. She stood in the center of the alcove for a while, wondering where Zirum went. Blaze approached the second curtain on her left and sniffed. "This way," he said. "I heard the royal family kept a secret antechamber behind the throne, and I'm smelling something evil this way." Bree approached the curtain and pulled it aside. Before them lay a short hallway leading to a room in the other end. Once through, they arrived in an altar room no bigger than Aunt Margaret's kitchen back in Passerelle. In the middle was a golden square altar that had the 4 elemental symbols etched into each corner. "This is where the ether used to be," Bree commented. Oriana floated over to the altar, and then looked up at the roof close above their heads. "Then where's the ether now?" the fairy asked. "And where's Zirum?" Blaze chimed in. Bree didn't answer. Instead, she walked around the altar, running her hands over all the symbols. She paused at the far side and took the pendant out of her shirt. Holding it in her palm, she watched the center jewel pulsate differently than the elemental jewels. She turned in place until all the jewels that were restored pulsated at the same time. She looked up at the wall in front of her. There was nothing special about it, but the pendant wanted her to go in that direction. She reached out and pressed on the wall. It collapsed away from her and revealed another hallway leading to an antechamber in the distance. The rocks that made up the wall had vanished into thin air. Instantly, she felt drawn to walk in that direction. Not only did the pendant want her to go that way, something in her soul told her that her destiny lay in the room ahead of them. Without telling the others, she walked down the hallway and into the adjoining room. The antechamber behind the hidden altar room was much bigger than what Bree imagined it would be. The roof was many feet above her, and hovering in the air near the top peak was a glowing orb of reddish gold light. It resembled an octopus whenever one of the multiple purple tendrils of energy reached out into the distance. She stood below it, looking up, amazed by its beauty. Blaze and Oriana followed her in, and were now standing on either side of her, staring at the light above as well. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Zirum's raspy voice echoed around the room, startling Bree. She looked across from her to see him standing at an upper level in the risers along the far wall. He took a step down and gestured to the light above. "The ether. Do you recognize it?" He continued, slowly walking down to the main floor. "I think you know it as the rose gold blood of Gol." Bree looked up again. The ether looked much like all the elements she had found in their respective temples, but this was more formed, like those pictures she used to see in Passerelle of the balls of water floating in space shuttles. It also made a barely noticeable crackling sound, like it was surging with energy. She may have been imagining it, but it seemed as though the ether was very slowly floating down toward them. Or maybe they were slowly floating up toward it. "This antechamber doesn't really exist in the realm of Gol," Zirum continued. "I suspect Sorato and Shen had helped creating this realm for hiding the ether. It didn't take me long to find it once we took over the castle. The ether has lived here in the altar room and in the temple of ether in the mountains. I just used my intuition to find it." Bree said nothing but held tight to the mystic sword. "I take it you defeated Regan?" he said. Bree nodded. "That must have been difficult, taking the life of another member of the Royal Goldian Legion." She gave Zirum a questioning look. "Don't look surprised. You are the last of the Legion's powers, making you one of the last members." "One of the last?" she finally asked. "I have waited a long time to have some one-on-one time with you, Bree," Zirum said, now pacing slowly from left to right. "It's so good to see you again and reunite." "What do you mean by that?" Zirum stopped pacing and glanced at her. "I guess I should look you in the eye before I use you to get the ether. You should know exactly who I am." Reaching up, he removed his hood and dropped his cloak to the floor. For a moment, Bree didn't recognize him. He was bearded, with soft, caring eyes that gave away his young age. It had been a while since she saw his picture, painted on the parchment in Shen's library, but the man standing before her was clearly her brother.